Well, good morning, and welcome to worship this morning. My name's Adam Hildebrand. I get to be one of the pastors here at LVfirst, and it is such a joy to be in worship with all of you here on this Easter Sunday. So glad we can have this time together, whether you're joining us here in person or you're joining us online, wherever you're joining us, we're excited to celebrate resurrection together in this place. Y'all look great this morning. I love the colors. I love seeing everybody all dressed up. Don't forget, we've got a photo booth right outside. If you and your family want to get a picture, you can do that right after service. It'd be a great time to do that. All the moms in the audience say amen. Yeah, you know you want that picture. You know that's the only reason you got your family up and dressed is to get that picture today. It's okay, I understand. It's good. It's a good thing. We are excited to be together, and I'm excited. If you haven't been here in a minute, we've been doing lots of great stuff in our community. We've been connecting the church to the community to the church. You heard McCade mention that earlier. We've got great stuff happening in terms of our community engagement, and our kids are going on a mission trip, and just all sorts of stuff. But today, we get to celebrate. Today, we get to celebrate together. And if you're here this morning, there's a couple things a couple of categories that you might fit into. Like first, you come here all the time. You're here on Sunday mornings, most Sundays. You want to be a part of everything that's going on in Lawrenceville and here at LVfirst. And we're so glad that you're in this place with us this morning. Second category of people is our Christmas and Easter folks. Welcome back. A couple things have changed since we were together. I got glasses. Thanks for noticing. No, we are so glad to have you. Anytime we can be together, we're glad that you are here. Christmas and Easter, if that's your thing, we're so happy that you take advantage of that. But I want you to know we're a little bit like your mom in this way, that we're glad anytime we can see you, but we'd love to see you more. Okay? So call every once in a while. It's good. Don't forget to call your mom today, by the way. The third category is this one. You were kind of bamboozled into coming this morning, tricked maybe. Your significant other, your spouse, your mom, whoever said, if you don't go to Easter service with me, you don't get fed. And you're like, I guess I'm going to Easter service. And that's okay. We're so glad that you're here. And you may have come in this morning expecting a certain thing to happen in the service. You may have come expecting lots of different things. I don't know what your expectations were when you walked in the door, but I know that all of us had some sort of expectation of what today was going to look like. We kind of expected that we'd have great music, that, families would be together, that we'd all be wearing bright colors and get pictures together. And maybe you're expecting to get through this so you can go to lunch. Get that ham, those potatoes going. Maybe that's your expectation. Well, whatever you came in the door expecting with your expectations today, I just want to ask you to be honest about them for a second, because we all have expectations. And here's what I want you to hear, is expectations often leave us disappointed. Expectations often leave us disappointed. A lot of times we have these expectations in our head of the way that things are going to go, and it's going to look like this, and it's going to go like this, and then it doesn't quite go that way, and you just feel disappointed the rest of the day. You're a little frustrated, you're a little angry, and you're not sure what that is inside of you that feels that way. Expectations oftentimes leave us disappointed. But I want you to hear this too. Expectations can really shade our reality. Like if we constantly feel disappointed by our expectations not being fulfilled, all of a sudden we assume that our expectations won't be fulfilled, that we won't get what we want, that we won't get what we were thinking about, and we just live our lives in this place of darkness and frustration and anger. And Easter is one of those days with lots of expectations that sometimes we're not sure what to do with. And if you're here today and you're not sure what to do with Easter, I want you to hear you're in good company, because the first followers of Jesus had no idea what to do with that very first Easter. They had no idea what to do on that very first Easter. The closest friends of Jesus, the people who had walked with him, the pillars of faith that have books named after them, had no idea what to do on that very first Easter. John records the story in this way in his gospel. He says this, that early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went and got Simon Peter and the other disciple who weren't there. They weren't standing outside the tomb like counting down, waiting for Jesus to come back. They didn't understand what Jesus had said all along. They weren't sure what to expect on that first Easter, so they're hiding out. I'm going to get Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, which I like that John calls himself that, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb, and the two were running together, but the other disciple, the one who wrote the book, outran Peter and reached the tomb first. So if you ain't first, you're last. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. And then Simon Peter came, following him because he was slower. That's the implication. And he went into the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head not lying with the other linen wrappings, but rolled up and placed by itself. And then the other disciple who reached the tomb first, as a reminder, also went in. And he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scriptures that he must rise from the dead. And then the disciples returned to their homes. So a couple things that we just need to acknowledge to start here is, did you catch when this story happens? When this story begins? This story starts in the dark. Right? All of the gospel writers agree on this one thing, that the first Easter begins in darkness. The gospel writers don't tell the story exactly the same way in any of the four gospels. There are little nuances and little differences, but all of them agree on this one thing, that Easter happened in the dark. That on that first Easter, that very first Easter, the disciples were in a place that lots of us live our lives, in the dark. They were in the dark. The Gospels don't try to paint a pretty picture or sugarcoat things. They acknowledge that there is brokenness and despair and pain in the world, and the first followers of Jesus felt it, and we feel it even as we're together in this place today. It's dark out, and one of Jesus' first followers shows up to the tomb, not to celebrate resurrection, not to bring the Easter dinner, but because she assumed that Jesus was still dead. Because that's what happens to dead people, is that they stay dead. She had no expectation that anything other than that was going to happen. She came with burial spices to embalm Jesus' body because they didn't have time on Friday after he died in the most difficult way possible. And the other disciples aren't even with her. They're so scared of the current cultural climate that they're hiding away in their house. She has to go and find them and then tell them this news that somebody has stolen Jesus' body. She doesn't say, "Guess what? Jesus is risen." Her expectation is that Jesus was still dead. Fear and darkness. And darkness and fear. Those seem to be some things that we can all agree on, no matter how we view the world. It seems to be the one thing that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox can all agree on. That there's something wrong in the world, that something is broken, that something not the way that it should be. And it doesn't matter which way they report on it, everything is wrong. It's dark and difficult and bad. There's something broken in this world, and we can't seem to come up with a way to fix it on our own. And so she goes back and shares this news with the other disciples. Something terrible has happened. Something even worse than what already happened. I mean, Jesus was killed on a cross on Friday and put in a tomb hastily. And I went to go embalm his body, but now somebody has stolen his body. She doesn't even go in the tomb. She just assumes the worst thing has happened. And the other two disciples, they get up and they run to the tomb. not to celebrate resurrection, but to see if what she's saying is the truth. And they get to the tomb and they see it just as she said it. And John records that the disciple whom Jesus loved believed. But what did he believe? He clearly didn't believe the resurrection. He even puts a note in here that says, "For as yet they did not understand the scriptures that he must rise from the dead." He just believed that Mary was telling the truth, that the world is broken and bad, and things just keep getting worse. The attitude of those first disciples on that first Easter, after they had spent all this time with Jesus and heard him proclaim good news time and time again, had heard him talk about the fact that he must be killed and then rise again, the idea that he would destroy this temple and then rebuild it in 3 days, never occurred to them. And so they're stuck in this question that so many of us are stuck in. All they ask is, what now? Like, what now? What now could possibly go wrong? What now could I experience that would make this situation worse? Things have been bad as they are, but what now? What's the next piece of news that I could get? What's the next thing that could happen? What now? And it begins to shape our worldview and shape the way that we see the world. And so, all of a sudden you're yelling at people in traffic because you assume they have ill intentions in trying to get in front of you. Maybe they just have somewhere to be. I don't know. But we all assume that it's a what now moment because we have this natural bent towards negativity. Like our brains are wired that way. We have a negativity bias. It takes 5 times more positive experiences to offset one negative experience. A study recently by the Journal of Consumer Research indicates that negative messages cause the greatest attitude shifts among consumers. Not just from good to bad, but from bad to worse. We continue to ask that what now question. And it's easier for us to focus on the cross because the cross makes sense to us. Yeah, Jesus gave himself up. Jesus died. That makes sense. Good people die. We kind of get that in our brains. We think that makes sense. They didn't show up at the tomb to see Jesus alive. Their expectation was that Jesus was still dead. And so none of those first followers of Jesus moved from this question of what now to a much better question. What if? What if Jesus really was who he said he was? What if Jesus was serious about death and resurrection? What if Jesus really meant that he could destroy the temple in 3 days, talking about his own body, and then rebuild it? What if Jesus really was the resurrection and the life? What if? None of the disciples asked this. None of them came with that expectation. What if? What if is one of those questions that has the power to really change the way that we see the world? It's interesting to me that we have such a negative perception of the world around us because we love a good comeback story, don't we? We love a story of like a Cinderella team making it really far in the NCAA tournament. We love these stories of things that seem like they weren't going to work and somehow, some way they end up working out. Most of us, we just are a little bit like Mary, who says that in verse 11, Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she bent over into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white sitting there where the body of Jesus had laid. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" There's no crying in baseball. There's definitely no crying on Easter. Well, why are you weeping? What are you doing? In fact, if you keep reading, what we find is that Jesus shows up in the garden there, and he has the same conversation with her. Woman, why are you weeping? What are you so upset about? You haven't asked the question, what if? Why are you weeping? Speaking of baseball, Major League opening day was on Thursday. I don't know if you know this, but viewership and attendance in Major League Baseball has declined rapidly since the early 2000s. Like, less people go to the games, less people are excited about watching baseball on TV. It's just been this decline. All of the stats go down and to the right, and I know all of you are Braves fans, so at the beginning of every year you think, maybe this is our year. It's the story of every Georgia fan ever. This is our year. Don't worry, they'll break your hearts. But what if, right? In the midst of that, there was this minor league baseball team in Savannah called the Savannah Sand Gnats. And the Savannah Sand Gnats had terrible seasons year after year after year after year, to the point that no one came to their games. They were essentially out of money. And two young people, Jesse and Emily Cole, decided that they would buy the team in 2015. And the first thing that they did after they bought the team was they changed the name from the Savannah Sand Gnats to the Savannah Bananas, right? And thousands of people showed up last weekend to watch the Savannah Bananas play at Coolray Field right down the road. Now, Jesse and Emily took a huge risk in buying a minor league baseball team, especially one that was terrible, that had been terrible for years and years and years. They maxed out all their credit cards. They drained their savings account. They had to sell their house. They lived in the stadium for a little while to make ends meet. But when they relaunched as the Savannah Bananas, it became the first professional baseball team that was named after a fruit. And all of a sudden, they got all this media attention, and they began to create a new way of viewing baseball, one that's actually affected the way that Major League Baseball plays their games. They have a time limit, they have a pitch limit, all sorts of different things to move the game along because they're focused on the fans, not necessarily on the players. Jesse comes out every game wearing this yellow tuxedo. And now baseball purists really struggle with the way the Savannah Bananas play, but it's okay because they're packing out stadiums. There are 70,000 people on their wait list to get tickets in Savannah. 4 million followers on social media. And I want you to hear what Jesse says about the team. He says, "We're not your typical baseball team. We're different. We take chances. We toe the line. We test the rules. We challenge the way things are supposed to be." Essentially, they ask the question, what if? What if we could take a struggling baseball team that has no hope and no future and defy all the expectations? What if our expectation became that the unexpected would happen, that resurrection becomes our expectation for the world around us, that all of us could see little bits of resurrection happening each and every day in all sorts of places, in our lives, in our families, in our church, in our community? What if that became our reality? In her book, Refugee of Faith, Deborah Reinstra talks about the story of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens erupted in May of 1980. I think I've got a picture of what Mount St. This is after the eruption in 1980. It lost 1,300 feet of elevation and gained a new 1.5 mile wide crater. And the debris and the ashfall from the volcanic blast devastated the mountain and its surrounding area for miles, crushing, burning, killing, and coating everything in hot ash. And all of the scientists said that it would be multiple lifetimes before life returned to the area. But 40 years later, the mountainside looks like this. It's covered with lush grasses and prairie lupins and alders. There are all sorts of animals everywhere. The streams flow clear. And Reinstra says this, that the reason that life returns so quickly is what ecologists now refer to as refugia. It's an ecological term. Refugia are these little pockets of safety where life continues to grow. Little holes in the ground where seeds or mosses stayed, little cracks in the rock where new life sprung forth, where new life emerges from. New life in places of death, hidden in rock and stone, revealed in a new garden. What we find in the story of the resurrection is Jesus reveals himself to Mary, and she says, thinking he was the gardener. Because we need to see that our expectation of brokenness and sin from the Garden of Eden is overcome by the reality of resurrection, made known in another garden, that life overcomes death. Or like Taylor Swift says it, what died didn't stay dead. That was from my friends up here. Anytime you quote Taylor Swift, they get excited. Everybody else is like, what? But what if? What if this unexpected event of the resurrection begins to define our expectations of the world around us? What if we begin to realize that the cross saved us, but the empty tomb freed us? The resurrection frees us to live life more fully, to engage the world in a unique way. So often we think that death is just going to be overcome by death, that we do the same thing over and over and think that things are going to change. But death doesn't overcome death. Death is overcome by new life, by the power of resurrection. Paul talks about it this way in Philippians chapter 3, verse 10. He says, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. That there is power in knowing resurrection. That when we've experienced, when we've seen it, all of a sudden it changes the way that we view the world. Resurrection frees us to say, what if? The resurrection inaugurates a new way of living for all of us. So what if? What if darkness no longer defined us? What if there was possibility and potential in every moment? What if there was the possibility of reconciliation in that relationship that you didn't think could ever be reconciled? What if there's redemption readily available to all of us through the work of Jesus? This question all of a sudden invites us not just to believe something, but to do something. Because the resurrection and asking this question, what if, has implications for us here and now. What if the story of the decline of the church in America isn't the end of the story? But that the church might experience resurrection through people like me and you coming together in this place. I mean, look around. It's like Mark Twain once said, the reports of my death are highly over-speculated. What if we decided that the resurrection was going to shape who we are and how we live? What if we saw lives resurrected from addiction? What if we wanted to see families put back together through the Parents First initiative that you guys have taken on? What if poverty and food insecurity were problems that could be overcome by a people who believe in resurrection? What if lives could be transformed through real community coming together, encouraging one another, learning together? What if What if the resurrection affirms that this life and the next life are one seamless reality that we get to fully live into now and forever? And all we have to do is ask the question, what if? So over the next few weeks, we're going to do just that. We're going to follow Jesus in these resurrection stories, and we're going to ask some what-if questions. What if the church made space for people to wrestle with difficult questions? What if the church really connected with its community? What if we were clear about what Jesus invited us to do? And what if we learned to walk with people instead of standing on issues? What if? What if we began to live in those ways? What if the experience of resurrection, the experience of Easter, changed all of us? N.T. Wright, pastor and theologian, talks about it in this way. He says, the point of resurrection is this, that what you do in the present by painting and preaching and singing and sewing and praying and teaching and building hospitals and digging wells and campaigning for justice and writing poems and caring for the needy and loving your neighbor as yourself, all of those things will last into God's future because of resurrection. What if we began to believe that those things matter? What if we really believe that the worst things are never the last things? What if we practiced resurrection every day? Because here's the truth. The empty tomb changes everything about everything for everyone forever. What if we began to live like that was the reality?